The fluorescent lights of Millbrook General Hospital cast their familiar harsh glow across the nurses' station as Sarah Mitchell glanced at the clock for what felt like the 100th time that evening. 11:47 p.m. Her shift had started at 7 a.m., and she still had over an hour left on what had turned into an unexpected double. "Sarah, room 314 is asking for more pain medication," called out Janet, the night nurse who was supposed to have relieved her 6 hours ago, but had called in sick at the last minute. Sarah nodded wearily, her blonde hair falling loose from the ponytail she'd tied that morning. At 35, she still looked young, but the last few years had etched fine lines around her green eyes, lines that deepened when she smiled at patients, but never quite disappeared anymore, even when she was alone. She made her way down the sterile hallway, her white sneakers squeaking softly against the linoleum floor. Room 314 housed Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman recovering from hip surgery who reminded Sarah of her own grandmother. The woman's family had been there all day, taking turns holding her hand and fussing over her comfort. "How are we feeling, Mrs. Patterson?" Sarah asked gently, checking the monitors beside the bed. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry to bother you so late." "I know you've been here all day," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice weak but kind. "It's just that the pain is getting worse, and I can't seem to get comfortable." Sarah smiled genuinely for the first time in hours. "That's what I'm here for. Let me get you something that'll help you rest." As she administered the medication, Mrs. Patterson squeezed her hand. "You're such a good girl, Sarah. Your children are lucky to have you." "Thank you, Mrs. Patterson. That means a lot." Sarah adjusted the woman's pillows and dimmed the lights. "Try to get some sleep now." Walking back to the nurse's station, Sarah felt the familiar ache in her lower back and the burning sensation in her feet that came with 16-hour shifts. She'd been working doubles more frequently lately, not by choice, but because the hospital was understaffed and she needed the overtime pay. Between the mortgage, the kids' expenses, and everything else, there never seemed to be enough money. Her phone buzzed with a text from her 16-year-old daughter, Emma. "Mom, Jake forgot his math homework. Can you help him when you get home?" Sarah sighed and typed back, "I'll be home late. Help him yourself, please. You're good at math." Emma's response came quickly. "Kay, drive safe. Love you." Despite her exhaustion, Sarah smiled. Her kids were good kids, responsible, caring, and surprisingly mature for their ages. They'd had to grow up fast after the divorce, but they'd handled it better than she'd expected. Finally, at 1:15 a.m., Sarah clocked out and made her way to her 10-year-old Honda Civic in the hospital parking lot. The October air was crisp, and she pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The drive home would take 20 minutes through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Ohio, a town where everyone knew everyone, and gossip traveled faster than the internet. She stopped at Murphy's Corner Store, the only place still open at this hour. The bell above the door chimed as she entered, and old Mr. Murphy looked up from his newspaper. "Working late again, Sarah?" he asked, his Irish accent still thick after 40 years in America. "Double shift," she replied, gathering essentials, milk, bread, eggs, and some sandwich meat for the kids' lunches. "How's Mrs. Murphy doing?" "Ah, she's fine. Keeps telling me I should retire, but what would I do with myself?" He chuckled as he rang up her items. "The usual lottery ticket tonight." Sarah hesitated for a moment. The $5 could buy Jake another pack of pencils for school or go toward Emma's college fund. But it was Friday night, and she'd been buying the same lottery ticket every week for almost 10 years now. The same numbers, her children's birthdays, 07, 14, 03, 16 to 22, with the Powerball numbers 09 for September, the month she'd started working at the hospital. "Yes, please," she said, handing him the crumpled $5 bill. Mr. Murphy printed out the ticket and handed it to her with a knowing smile. "This could be the week, Sarah." She laughed softly. "I'll believe it when I see it, Mr. Murphy." As she drove through the empty streets toward home, Sarah let her mind wander. What would she do if she actually won? The jackpot was up to $15 million this week. Not the biggest ever, but enough to change everything. She'd pay off the house, set up college funds for Emma and Jake, maybe even take a real vacation somewhere warm. But those were dangerous thoughts. She'd learned long ago not to count on luck or other people. The only thing she could count on was herself, her work, and the love of her children. Her house was a modest 2-story colonial in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The white paint was peeling slightly around the windows, and the front steps needed repair. But it was theirs. Well, theirs and the bank's for another 12 years. She pulled into the driveway and noticed that the porch light was on. Emma always left it on when she worked late. As she gathered her purse and the grocery bag, she heard a car door slam behind her. "Sarah, wait up!" She turned to see Marcus Thompson walking toward her from an old pickup truck parked across the street. Her ex-husband looked the same as always, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of rugged good looks that had attracted her when they were both 22. But now, at 38, his face showed the wear of too many disappointments and too many nights at the casino. "Marcus, what are you doing here? It's almost 2 a.m. I was driving by and saw your car pull in. We need to talk, Sarah." She felt her shoulders tense. "The kids are asleep and I have to work tomorrow. Whatever this is about, it can wait." "It's about money, Sarah. I'm in a tough spot, and I need your help." Of course it was about money. It was always about money with Marcus. "We've been divorced for 2 years, Marcus. Your money problems aren't my responsibility anymore." Come on, don't be like that. I know things ended badly between us, but I'm trying to get back on my feet. I just need a loan, maybe $500. I'll pay you back with interest." Sarah stared at him, feeling a familiar mixture of anger and exhaustion. "A loan? Like the loan you needed to fix your truck 6 months ago that you never paid back? Or like the loan you needed for your security deposit that somehow disappeared at the track?" "This is different, Sarah. I'm different. I haven't been gambling, I swear." "Then where's your paycheck from the construction site? You were supposed to start that job 3 weeks ago." Marcus's jaw tightened. They let me go. It wasn't my fault. The foreman had it out for me from day one." Sarah shifted the grocery bag to her other arm. "There's always an excuse, isn't there? It's never your fault, Marcus. It's never your gambling, your drinking, your refusal to show up on time or take responsibility for anything. I'm trying to change, Sarah. I really am. But I can't do it without help. You had help. You had me, you had the kids, you had a family who loved you. And you threw it all away for what? For the chance to hit it big at the casino? For the thrill of risking everything we'd worked for? That's not fair, and you know it. What's not fair is Emma having to get a part-time job at 16 to help with her own school expenses. What's not fair is Jake asking me why his dad doesn't come to his baseball games anymore. What's not fair is me working 16-hour shifts to keep a roof over our heads while you're out there chasing your next big score." Marcus ran his hands through his dark hair, a gesture she remembered from their marriage. "Look, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you and the kids, but I'm trying to make it right. You can make it right by getting a job and keeping it. You can make it right by being a father to your children instead of someone who only shows up when he needs something." "I will, Sarah, I promise. Just help me out this one time and I'll prove it to you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, seeing the man she'd once loved, the man she'd married and had children with. But she also saw the man who'd lied to her repeatedly, who'd emptied their savings account to feed his gambling addiction, who'd chosen his next bet over his family time and time again. "No, Marcus, I can't keep enabling you. I won't." His expression hardened. "Fine. Be that way. But don't come crying to me when you're working yourself to death for pennies. You'll never have anything better than this, Sarah. You'll never win anything, never catch a break. You're not that kind of person." As he walked back to his truck, Sarah felt the lottery ticket crinkle in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out and looked at the numbers in the dim porch light. Her children's birthdays, the dates that marked the beginning of her real life, the life that mattered. "Maybe not," she whispered to herself as Marcus drove away. "But at least I know who I am." She climbed the front steps, fumbling for her keys, and let herself into the quiet house. Tomorrow would bring another day of work, another day of responsibilities, another day of being the parent her children could count on. But tonight, for just a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to prove Marcus wrong about everything. Sarah's alarm clock buzzed at 7:30 a.m., but she was already awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about her confrontation with Marcus the night before. The October sunlight filtered through her bedroom curtains, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor that Marcus had promised to refinish 3 summers ago. She padded downstairs in her robe and slippers, the old house creaking familiarly beneath her feet. The kitchen was her favorite room, warm and inviting despite its outdated appliances and the cabinet door that never quite closed properly. She'd made it cozy with plants on the windowsill and family photos on the refrigerator, most of them from before the divorce. The coffee maker gurgled to life as she heard footsteps on the stairs. Emma appeared first, her long blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun, already dressed in her weekend uniform of jeans and an oversized sweater. "Morning, Mom. You got in really late last night." "Double shift," Sarah said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "How did Jake do with his math homework?" "He got it done, but he's still struggling with algebra. I think he needs a tutor." Sarah felt the familiar knot in her stomach that came with any mention of additional expenses. "We'll figure something out. Maybe I can help him more on my days off." Jake thundered down the stairs, his sandy brown hair sticking up in all directions. At 14, he was all elbows and knees, growing so fast that his jeans always seemed too short. He was the spitting image of his father, which sometimes made Sarah's heart ache. "Mom, can we have pancakes?" he asked, already rummaging through the pantry. "Sure, baby. Sit down. I'll make them." As Sarah mixed the batter, she felt herself relaxing for the first time in days. Saturday mornings were sacred in their house. No rushing to school or work, no uniforms or schedules. Just the 3 of them, together. She poured the coffee and settled at the kitchen table with the newspaper while the pancakes cooked. The lottery results were on page 3, next to the weather forecast. She'd glanced at them hundreds of times over the years, never really expecting to see her numbers. But today was different. Her eyes scanned the winning numbers: 007, 14, 03, 16, 22, Powerball 09. She blinked and read them again, then a third time. "Oh my God," she whispered, her coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. "What's wrong, Mom?" Emma asked, looking up from her phone. Sarah fumbled for her purse, her hands shaking as she pulled out the lottery ticket. She spread it on the table next to the newspaper, comparing the numbers again and again. 07, 14, 3, 16, 22, Powerball 09. They matched, every single one. "Mom, you're scaring me," Jake said, abandoning his breakfast to peer over her shoulder. I think I won the lottery," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What?" Emma shrieked, jumping up from her chair. "The numbers, they match. Look." Sarah pointed to the newspaper with a trembling finger. "These are your birthdays, July 14th, March 16th, and September for my Powerball number." Emma grabbed the newspaper and the ticket, checking them side by side. "Mom, these are the same numbers. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." "How much did you win?" Jake asked, his eyes wide. Sarah looked at the jackpot amount printed in the newspaper. $15 million. The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of pancakes sizzling on the stove. Sarah stared at the ticket in her hands, unable to process what she was seeing. $15 million. More money than she'd ever imagined having. "Are you sure?" Emma asked quietly. "Like, really sure?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I bought the ticket at Murphy's last night. Same numbers I always play." She looked at her children, seeing her own shock reflected in their faces. We're rich." Emma let out a whoop of joy and hugged her mother so hard that Sarah nearly fell off her chair. Jake joined in, and for a moment, the 3 of them held each other in the middle of their small kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. "What does this mean?" Jake asked when they finally pulled apart. It means college is paid for, Sarah said, wiping tears from her eyes. It means I don't have to work double shifts anymore. It means we can fix the house and maybe take a real vacation. Can we get a new car? Emma asked. Not that there's anything wrong with the Honda, but… Sarah laughed. We can get whatever we want. But first, we need to be smart about this. We can't tell anyone yet, not until I figure out how to claim it and what we need to do legally. Not even Aunt Helen? Emma asked. Not even Helen. Not yet. This is huge, guys. Life-changing huge. And we need to be careful about how we handle it. What about Dad? Jake asked quietly. Sarah's smile faltered. Marcus. In all the excitement, she'd forgotten about their confrontation the night before. His bitter words about her never winning anything, never catching a break. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, she said. For now, this stays between us three. Promise? Both kids nodded solemnly, but Sarah could see the excitement bubbling beneath the surface. $15 million. It was enough to change everything, to give her children the futures they deserved, to finally stop worrying about money, to live instead of just surviving. The smell of burning pancakes snapped her back to reality. She rushed to the stove, flipping the blackened pancakes with a laugh. I guess even lottery winners can burn breakfast. I don't care, Jake said, grinning. These are going to be the best burned pancakes ever. They spent the morning researching what to do when you win the lottery. Sarah's laptop was ancient and slow, but eventually they found the Ohio Lottery website and learned about the claiming process. She'd have to go to the lottery office in Columbus, provide identification, and decide whether to take the lump sum or annual payments. Take the lump sum, Emma advised, reading over her mother's shoulder. It's less money, but you get it all at once. That's still almost $9 million after taxes, Sarah said, hardly believing the words coming out of her mouth. They were so absorbed in their research that they didn't hear the pickup truck pull into the driveway or the footsteps on the front porch. The doorbell rang, followed immediately by a familiar knocking pattern. That's Dad, Jake said, jumping up from the couch. Sarah's heart rate spiked. Remember, not a word about this, not yet. She opened the front door to find Marcus standing there with a small bouquet of supermarket flowers and what he probably thought was a charming smile. Hey, Sarah, I brought flowers, as an apology for last night. Marcus, it's not your weekend with the kids. I know, but I wanted to make things right. I was thinking maybe I could take them to lunch, spend some time with them. He looked past her into the living room. Hey, kids! Emma and Jake appeared behind Sarah, their faces carefully neutral. Hi, Dad, Emma said. What are you guys up to? You all look excited about something. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Marcus had always been good at reading people, especially when he suspected they were hiding something from him. Just a lazy Saturday morning, she said. The kids were helping me with some research online. Research? Marcus stepped into the house without being invited, his eyes scanning the living room. The laptop was still open on the coffee table, and Sarah prayed he couldn't see the screen from where he stood. For work, she said quickly. New hospital policies. But Jake, in his 14-year-old excitement, couldn't quite contain himself. Mom, should we call Grandma about the family reunion planning? Sarah interrupted smoothly. I told you we'd call her later. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. He'd always been suspicious by nature, a trait that had worsened during their marriage as his gambling addiction grew. Family reunion? Since when do you plan family reunions? Since my mother asked me to help, Sarah said, moving to close the laptop. Marcus, what did you really come here for? He held up the flowers again. I told you I wanted to apologize, and I wanted to talk to you about something important. If it's about money again. It's not about money, he said, though his eyes suggested otherwise. It's about us, about our family. Emma and Jake exchanged glances. They'd heard this speech before, usually when Marcus was in some kind of trouble and needed Sarah's help. Dad, we were kind of in the middle of something, Emma said diplomatically. That's okay, sweetheart. I can wait. Marcus settled onto the couch, making it clear he wasn't leaving anytime soon. "So what kind of research are you doing, Sarah? You seem different today. Happy." Sarah felt trapped. Marcus was like a dog with a bone when he sensed a secret, and she could see him cataloging every detail. The family's unusually good mood, the hastily closed laptop, Jake's interrupted comment about calling Grandma. "I'm always happy on Saturdays," she said. "It's my day off." "But you worked until 2 a.m. last night. You should be exhausted." "I got enough sleep." Marcus leaned back on the couch, his eyes never leaving her face. "You know, Sarah, I've been thinking about what I said last night. About you never catching a break, never winning anything." Sarah's mouth went dry. "What about it? I was wrong to say that. You're a good person, and good things should happen to good people. Maybe your luck is about to change." The lottery ticket was in her purse, not 10 feet away from where Marcus sat. Sarah felt like it was burning a hole through the leather, screaming its secret to anyone who would listen. "Maybe," she said carefully. "In fact," Marcus continued, his voice taking on the wheeling tone she remembered from their marriage, "I have a feeling something big is about to happen for you. For all of us." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about second chances, Princess. Sometimes the universe gives you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it most." Sarah stared at her ex-husband, realizing with growing horror that somehow, impossibly, he knew, or at least suspected. But how could he? She'd only found out herself an hour ago. "Marcus," she said slowly, "what are you really doing here?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm here to be part of whatever good news you're celebrating. Because we're still family, Sarah. No matter what happened between us, we're still family." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the mantel clock. Sarah looked at her children, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. The lottery ticket that had seemed like a miracle an hour ago now felt like a curse, a secret too dangerous to keep, but too valuable to share. Especially with Marcus Thompson. "I don't know what you think you know," Sarah said finally, "but there's no good news here. Just another ordinary Saturday morning." Marcus's smile widened. "If you say so, Sarah. But if anything changes, if anything exciting happens, I hope you'll remember that I'm here for you. For all of you." He stood up, still holding the wilted flowers. "I'll leave these in the kitchen. Kids, maybe we can do lunch tomorrow instead." After he left, Sarah triple-locked the front door and leaned against it, her heart pounding. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "he knows something." "He suspects something," Sarah corrected. "But he can't know. It's impossible." "What do we do?" Jake asked. Sarah looked at her children, then at her purse where the lottery ticket lay hidden. $15 million. Enough to change their lives forever. But also enough to bring Marcus back into their lives in ways she couldn't even imagine. "We stick to the plan," she said. "We don't tell anyone anything until I figure out how to handle this properly." But even as she said it, Sarah knew it was too late. Marcus Thompson was like a shark who'd smelled blood in the water. He wouldn't give up until he found out what they were hiding. And when he did, Sarah suspected their lottery win would become the biggest fight of their lives. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of phone calls, flowers, and increasingly frequent visits from Marcus. Sarah felt like she was living in a pressure cooker, the secret of the lottery win growing heavier with each passing day. She'd managed to take a personal day and drive to Columbus to claim the ticket, choosing the lump sum payment of $8.7 million after taxes. The lottery officials had been professional and discreet, explaining the process and timeline for receiving the money. The funds would be transferred to her account within 30 business days, but keeping the secret was becoming impossible. Marcus had called 17 times in the past week alone. He'd shown up at the hospital twice, bringing her coffee and asking the nurses about her good mood. He'd taken the kids to dinner 3 times, something he hadn't done in months. And each time he'd come back with more questions about the family's plans for the future. "He's driving me crazy," Sarah told her best friend Helen Rodriguez as they sat in the hospital cafeteria during their lunch break. It's like he can smell that something's changed, but he can't figure out what. Helen, a no-nonsense woman with graying hair and sharp eyes, stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Marcus Thompson never could stand not knowing a secret. Remember when you were pregnant with Emma and trying to keep it quiet until the second trimester? He practically interrogated every nurse in the maternity ward. This is different, Helen. He's desperate, more desperate than I've ever seen him. Desperate men do desperate things, Sarah. What aren't you telling me? Sarah looked at her friend, the woman who'd held her hand through the divorce, who'd watched her children when she worked double shifts, who'd never once judged her for the choices she'd made. If she could tell anyone, it would be Helen. But not yet. Not until she figured out how to handle Marcus. I'm just tired, Sarah said. Tired of him thinking he can waltz back into our lives whenever he wants something. Helen reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. Don't let him make you forget that. That afternoon, Sarah returned home to find Marcus's pickup truck in her driveway and Emma's car missing. Her heart rate spiked as she hurried to the front door, finding it unlocked. Hello? She called out, stepping into the living room. We're in the kitchen, Mom, Jake called back. She found Marcus sitting at her kitchen table with a man she didn't recognize, a thin, balding man in an expensive suit who looked entirely out of place in her modest home. Sarah! Marcus stood up, his smile too bright. Perfect timing. I want you to meet my friend David Pearson. He's a lawyer. The man stood and extended his hand. Mrs. Thompson, it's a pleasure to meet you. It's Mitchell now, Sarah said coolly, not taking his hand. And I didn't invite you into my home. Sarah, don't be rude, Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning tone she remembered from their marriage. David's here to help us. Help us with what? With planning our future, Marcus said. Sit down, please. We need to talk. Sarah looked around the kitchen. Jake was sitting at the counter, his homework spread out in front of him, but she could see he was listening to every word. Emma was nowhere to be seen. Where's Emma? She went to her friend Ashley's house, Marcus said. I thought it would be better if we had some privacy for this conversation. Sarah's blood ran cold. You sent my daughter away so you could ambush me in my own home? Nobody's ambushing anyone, David Pearson said smoothly. I'm here because Marcus has some concerns about your family's financial future, and he wants to make sure everyone's interests are protected. What interests? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand exactly what was happening. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense. Sarah, I know you won the lottery. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Sarah felt the room spin slightly, her carefully constructed secret crumbling around her. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. I've been watching you for 2 weeks, Sarah. The way you've been acting, the phone calls you've been making, the day you took off work to drive to Columbus. I called Murphy's, and he told me you bought a ticket the night before the drawing, the same numbers you always play. Sarah glanced at Jake, who was staring at her with wide eyes. She'd told the kids to keep the secret, but they were just children. Had one of them said something? Jake didn't say anything, Marcus continued, reading her expression. But Emma, well, she's 16 and excited about her future. She might have mentioned something to her friends about college being taken care of now. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in around her. What do you want, Marcus? I want what's fair, he said. We were married for 15 years, Sarah. We built a life together, had children together. Those lottery numbers, they're our kids' birthdays. That makes this a family win. David Pearson opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. I've prepared some documents that will protect everyone's interests. A simple agreement that acknowledges the lottery winnings as marital property that should be split equitably. We've been divorced for 2 years, Sarah said, her voice stronger than she felt. But the ticket was purchased with money from your joint account. Marcus lied smoothly. "And the numbers represent our shared family history." "That's not true, and you know it." "I bought that ticket with my own money, from my own paycheck." "Can you prove that?" David asked. "Do you have receipts, bank records showing the exact source of the $5 used to purchase the ticket?" Sarah stared at him, realizing this had been planned. Marcus hadn't just stumbled onto her secret. He'd been building a case. "This is insane," she said. "You have no legal claim to money I won after our divorce." "Maybe not," Marcus said, "but I have a moral claim. And more importantly, I have a relationship with our children that could be affected by how this situation is handled." The threat was subtle, but clear. Sarah looked at Jake, who was trying to pretend he wasn't listening, and felt a surge of protective anger. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm trying to be reasonable," Marcus said. "Look, Sarah, I know you're angry with me. I know I made mistakes during our marriage. But this lottery win is a chance for all of us to start over. To be a real family again." "A real family." Sarah laughed bitterly. "Where was this real family when you were gambling away our savings? Where was it when you missed Emma's graduation because you were at the casino?" "I was sick, Sarah. Gambling addiction is a disease, and I'm getting help for it now." "You're getting help now because you want half of my lottery winnings." Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the desperation underneath. "I need this, Sarah. I'm in debt. Serious debt. The kind of people I owe money to don't negotiate payment plans. That's not my problem anymore. It is if you want our kids to have a father." The room fell silent. Jake had stopped pretending to do his homework and was staring at his parents with a mixture of fear and confusion. "Jake, go to your room," Sarah said quietly. "But Mom, now please." After Jake left, Sarah turned back to Marcus and his lawyer. "Get out of my house." "Sarah, please," Marcus said. "I'm trying to do this the easy way, but if you force me to take legal action..." "You'll what? Sue me for money you have no right to?" "I'll petition for increased custody of the children," David Pearson said calmly. "And I'll argue that a sudden windfall of millions of dollars creates an unstable environment for minors. The court might decide that the children need a more balanced living situation." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. "You wouldn't." "I don't want to," Marcus said. "But I will if you leave me no choice. Sarah, I'm trying to be fair here. I'm not asking for half. I'm asking for 40%. You keep 60%. I take 40, and we both start over. 40% of almost $9 million is over $3 million, Marcus. And you'll still have over $5 million. More money than you ever dreamed of having." Sarah looked at the papers David had spread across her kitchen table. Legal documents that would give Marcus millions of dollars he didn't deserve, hadn't earned, and would probably gamble away within a year. "I need time to think about this," she said. "Of course," Marcus said, standing up. "Take all the time you need. But Sarah..." He paused at the kitchen door. "I've already quit my job. I've told people we're getting back together. I've made promises based on this money that I can't break." "You did what?" "I had to, Sarah. My creditors were getting impatient. I had to give them something to keep them from..." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. "You're unbelievable," Sarah whispered. "I'm desperate," Marcus said. "And desperate people do what they have to do to survive." After they left, Sarah sat alone in her kitchen, staring at the legal documents. Outside, she could hear Jake shooting baskets in the driveway, the rhythmic bounce of the ball oddly comforting. Her phone rang. "Emma." "Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to say anything, but Ashley kept asking why I was so excited about college, and I might have said something about not having to worry about money anymore." "It's okay, sweetheart. It's not your fault. Is Dad really going to try to take the money?" Sarah looked at the papers again, at the signatures lines waiting for her name. "I don't know, baby, but we'll figure it out. Are you going to sign those papers?" "I don't know that either. But even as she said it, Sarah knew she was trapped. Marcus had played his cards perfectly, threatening the kids, claiming he'd made promises to dangerous people, painting himself as the victim of circumstances beyond his control. The lottery ticket that was supposed to set them free had become the very thing that might destroy them. And Marcus Thompson, the man who'd told her she'd never win anything, was about to prove himself right in the cruelest way possible. 3 days passed before Sarah made her decision. 3 days of sleepless nights, of watching her children tiptoe around the house like they were walking on eggshells, of Marcus calling every few hours with increasing urgency. "The people I owe money to aren't patient, Sarah," he'd said during his last call. "They're starting to ask questions about when they'll see their money. I need an answer." Sarah had hung up without responding, but she knew she couldn't delay anymore. The Lottery Commission had already processed her claim, and the money would be in her account within the week. Once it was there, Marcus would somehow find a way to get his hands on it, through legal action, through manipulation, or through threats she didn't even want to imagine. She'd called him that morning and arranged to meet at Murphy's corner store at 3 p.m. It seemed fitting somehow to end this where it had all begun. "I want the kids there," she'd told him. "Why?" "Because this affects them too. They deserve to understand what's happening." Marcus had agreed, probably thinking she was going to cave to his demands. Maybe she was. Sarah honestly wasn't sure what she was going to do until she was actually standing there, holding the lottery ticket in her hands. She arrived at Murphy's 15 minutes early, her heart pounding as she parked the Honda across the street. The October afternoon was crisp and clear, with golden leaves swirling in the breeze. Such a beautiful day for what felt like the end of the world. Old Mr. Murphy was behind the counter, arranging a display of Halloween candy. He looked up as she entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Sarah, how are you, dear? Haven't seen you since that night you bought your ticket." "I'm fine, Mr. Murphy, just meeting some people here, if that's okay." Of course. "Can I get you anything while you wait?" Sarah shook her head, taking a position near the lottery machine where she'd bought the ticket that had changed everything. The same machine that had printed out what should have been her family's salvation, but had instead become their curse. Marcus arrived exactly on time, with Emma and Jake trailing behind him. Both kids looked nervous, Emma clutching her purse strap like a lifeline, Jake's hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Mom," Emma said quietly, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," Sarah replied, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. David Pearson appeared a moment later, briefcase in hand, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him came 2 more people Sarah didn't recognize, a middle-aged woman with a notebook and a younger man with a camera. "Who are they?" Sarah asked. "Linda's a reporter from the Millbrook Gazette," Marcus said. "And Tom's a photographer. I thought it would be nice to document this moment for the family." Sarah stared at him. "You called the press?" "I called Linda because she's been covering local lottery winners for years. This is a big story for our little town, Sarah. The single mother who won $15 million and decided to share it with her family. It's inspiring." The manipulation was so blatant, so calculated, that Sarah almost laughed. Marcus had orchestrated this entire scene, the public location, the children as witnesses, the press coverage, to maximum pressure her into signing his papers. "Where are the documents?" she asked. David opened his briefcase and pulled out the legal papers, spreading them on the counter next to the lottery machine. "Everything's ready. You just need to sign here, here, and here." Sarah picked up the pen he offered, aware that everyone in the store was watching her. "Mr." Murphy had stopped arranging his candy display. The reporter was scribbling notes. The photographer was adjusting his camera settings. "Before I sign anything," Sarah said, "I want to say something." Marcus relaxed visibly. "Of course. Whatever you want to say." Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out the lottery ticket. It was slightly crumpled from being carried around for 3 weeks, but the numbers were still clearly visible. 3 weeks ago, I bought this ticket with $5 from my own paycheck. $5 that I almost didn't spend because I was worried about Jake needing new pencils for school. She looked at her children, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. I played the same numbers I've played for 10 years, your birthdays, because you two are the most important things in my life. Mom, Jake said softly. Let me finish, baby. Sarah turned to face Marcus. You told me that night that I'd never win anything, that I wasn't that kind of person. And you know what? You were right. Marcus's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? I'm not the kind of person who wins the lottery. I'm the kind of person who works 16-hour shifts to keep a roof over my children's heads. I'm the kind of person who sacrifices her own needs to make sure her kids have what they need. I'm the kind of person who doesn't run away when things get difficult. The store had fallen completely silent. Even the reporter had stopped writing. I'm also not the kind of person who rewards bad behavior, Sarah continued, or who enables someone else's addiction, or who teaches her children that you can get something for nothing just by manipulating the people who love you. Sarah, Marcus said, his voice carrying a warning. We had a deal. No, Marcus, you had a plan.
You quit your job. You told people we were getting back together. You made promises to dangerous people, all without asking me first. You assumed I would just go along with whatever you wanted because I always did before. She held up the lottery ticket, the paper catching the fluorescent light. You want to know what I learned from this ticket? I learned that money doesn't change who you are. It reveals who you are.
And it's revealed that you're still the same man who chose gambling over his family, who chose his own selfish desires over his children's well-being. I'm trying to provide for my family, Marcus said, his voice rising. I'm trying to give our kids a better life. By threatening to take them away from me if I don't give you millions of dollars you didn't earn? I didn't threaten. You brought a lawyer to my house and had him tell me you'd petition for custody if I didn't sign your papers, in front of Jake. You made our 14-year-old son listen to you threaten to tear apart his family unless you got paid. Marcus's face was flushing red. I was trying to be reasonable. No, you were trying to be manipulative, just like you've always been. Sarah looked at the lottery ticket again, then at her children. Emma, Jake, I want you to understand something. This ticket represents $15 million, more money than our family has ever had, or probably ever will have again. Both kids nodded, watching her intently. And I want you to watch what I do with it, because this is the most important lesson I'll ever teach you. Sarah looked around the store, meeting the eyes of everyone present, her children, Marcus, the lawyer, the reporter, Mr. Murphy. Then she looked down at the lottery ticket in her hands. You're right, Marcus. I'm not the kind of person who wins the lottery. I'm the kind of person who works for what she has. I'm the kind of person who doesn't compromise her values for money, no matter how much money it is. Sarah, what are you doing? Marcus asked. But there was something in his voice now that hadn't been there before. Fear. I'm teaching my children that some things are more important than money, Sarah said. I'm teaching them that you don't reward bullies, even when they're family. I'm teaching them that you can't put a price on your self-respect. She began to tear the lottery ticket. No! Marcus lunged forward, but Sarah was already ripping it in half. Mom! Emma gasped. Sarah tore it again, the pieces fluttering to the floor of Murphy's corner store like confetti. $15 million reduced to scraps of paper at her feet. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at the pieces of paper scattered across the floor, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You're insane, he whispered. You just threw away $15 million. No, Sarah said calmly. I just threw away your power over me. But the money was never yours to begin with, and it was never worth what you were trying to make me pay for it. Marcus dropped to his knees, frantically trying to gather the torn pieces of the ticket. We can tape it back together. The Lottery Commission will still honor it if we can prove. Marcus, stop. Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. It's over. You don't understand, he said, still scrambling for the pieces. The people I owe money to, they're not going to just forget about this. They're going to... That's not my problem anymore, Sarah said. You made those debts. You made those promises. You quit your job. Those were your choices, not mine. She knelt down next to him, speaking softly so only he could hear. I spent 15 years of my life trying to save you from yourself, Marcus. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life doing it too. Marcus looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. Sarah, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I know you will, she said sadly. That's the problem. She stood up and turned to her children, who were staring at her with expressions of shock and something that might have been pride. Kids, let's go home. As they walked toward the door, the reporter called out, Mrs. Mitchell, can I ask you a question? Sarah paused. What? Why did you do it? Why did you destroy a ticket worth $15 million? Sarah considered the question, looking back at Marcus, who was still kneeling on the floor surrounded by pieces of paper that had once represented a fortune. Because I realized that some things cost more than they're worth, she said finally. And I decided I wasn't willing to pay that price. Outside, as they walked to their cars, Emma caught her arm. Mom, are you okay? Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Jake, who was walking beside them with his head held high. I'm better than okay, she said. For the first time in years, I'm free. As they drove home, Sarah caught sight of Marcus in her rear-view mirror. He was still standing in front of Murphy's corner store, staring at the pieces of lottery ticket in his hands, finally understanding that some things, once broken, can never be put back together again. And for the first time since she'd discovered those winning numbers, Sarah Mitchell felt like she had truly won something valuable. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the kitchen of her still modest home, pouring coffee into the same chipped mug she'd used for years. The October morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the family photos on the refrigerator, including a new one of Emma in her cap and gown from her high school graduation. The house looked exactly the same. The cabinet door still didn't close properly, the front steps still needed repair, and the Honda in the driveway had just rolled over 200,000 miles. But something fundamental had changed, something that had nothing to do with money, and everything to do with the woman who lived within these walls. Mom, you're going to be late, Emma called from the living room, where she was packing boxes for her move to Ohio State University. I'm coming, Sarah replied, but she took a moment to savor the morning quiet. These peaceful moments had become more precious since the day she'd torn up the lottery ticket. She'd learned to appreciate them in a way she never had before. Her phone buzzed with a text from Helen. Proud of you. See you at the office. Sarah smiled. Helen had been her rock through the aftermath of what the local newspaper had dubbed the Millbrook Miracle, though Sarah privately thought of it as the day I found myself. The story had gone viral within days. A single mother who'd destroyed a $15 million lottery ticket rather than share it with her manipulative ex-husband. The video that Tom the photographer had captured showed Sarah's calm dignity as she explained her decision, and it had been viewed millions of times on social media. The reaction had been overwhelming. Interview requests from national news programs, book deals, speaking engagements, and thousands of letters from strangers who'd been inspired by her story. Sarah had politely declined most of them, accepting only a few local speaking opportunities at women's shelters and community centers. But the attention had brought unexpected opportunities. Mom, Mr. Davidson is here, Jake called from the front door. Robert Davidson was waiting on the front porch, his silver hair gleaming in the morning sun. At 62, he owned 3 successful businesses in Millbrook and had become something of a local legend for his philanthropy and business acumen. Good morning, Sarah. I hope I'm not too early. Not at all, Mr. Davidson. Coffee? Please call me Robert. And yes, coffee would be wonderful. They sat at the kitchen table where, 6 months ago, David Pearson had spread out legal documents demanding millions of dollars. Now it held job contracts and business plans that represented something far more valuable than money, a future built on Sarah's own merits. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week," Robert said, stirring cream into his coffee. "About the wellness program for my employees. I keep coming back to what you said about people needing to feel valued, not just compensated." Sarah nodded. "When people feel like their employer cares about their well-being, they're more productive, more loyal, and happier. It's not complicated, but it requires genuine commitment." "Which is why I want you to run it," Robert said. "Not just coordinate it or manage it. I want you to build it from the ground up. Design the programs, hire the staff, create something that other companies will want to emulate." The offer was generous, a salary that was 3 times what she made at the hospital, full benefits, and the autonomy to create something meaningful. But more than that, it was an opportunity to use her nursing background and her natural empathy to help people in a completely new way. "I need to give the hospital proper notice," Sarah said, "and I want to make sure Emma's settled at college first." "Of course. We can start whenever you're ready." After Robert left, Sarah sat alone in her kitchen, thinking about the path that had led her here. 6 months ago, she'd been a single mother working double shifts, struggling to pay bills and worried about her children's futures. Today, she was about to embark on a career that would not only provide financial security, but would also give her the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. None of it had anything to do with luck or lottery tickets. It had everything to do with the choice she'd made to value her integrity over money. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. She glanced at the caller ID, and her stomach clenched slightly. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she'd learned to be cautious about unknown calls. "Hello?" "Sarah, it's Marcus." She hadn't heard from him since the day at Murphy's corner store. According to Emma, he'd left Millbrook shortly after that, though no one knew where he'd gone. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I wanted to talk to you, to apologize." His voice sounded different, older, more tired. "I know I don't deserve it, but I was hoping we could meet somewhere. I have some things I need to say." Sarah considered hanging up, but something in his tone made her pause. "Where are you?" "I'm in Cincinnati. I've been getting help. Real help this time. I'm in a program for gambling addiction, and part of the process is making amends to the people I've hurt." "I'm listening." "I can't do this over the phone, Sarah. Could you meet me somewhere? Maybe at that diner on Route 23? I know it's a lot to ask, but I need to say these things to your face." Sarah looked at the clock. She had a few hours before her shift at the hospital, and despite everything Marcus had put her through, she found herself curious about what he wanted to say. "1 hour," she said. "And Marcus, this doesn't mean anything between us has changed." "I know. Thank you, Sarah. Really." The diner was nearly empty when she arrived, just a few truckers and an elderly couple sharing a piece of pie. Marcus was sitting in a corner booth, looking smaller somehow than she remembered. His face was thinner, his clothes were clean but worn, and his hands were wrapped around a coffee cup like it was an anchor. "Thank you for coming," he said as she slid into the booth across from him. "You said you wanted to apologize." Marcus nodded, not meeting her eyes. "I've been in therapy for 4 months now. Real therapy, not just the court-ordered stuff from before, and I've learned some things about myself that I don't like very much." "Such as?" "Such as the fact that I spent our entire marriage treating you like a safety net instead of a partner. I never saw you as someone with your own dreams and ambitions. I saw you as someone who would always be there to clean up my messes." Sarah said nothing, waiting. "When I heard about the lottery ticket, I didn't think about what it meant for you or the kids. I only thought about how I could use it to solve my problems. I turned what should have been the best thing that ever happened to you into another one of my schemes." "Yes, you did. I've replayed that day at Murphy's 1,000 times in my head. Watching you tear up that ticket, I thought you were crazy. I thought you were destroying our family's future." He finally looked up at her. "But you weren't, were you? You were saving it." "I was saving myself," Sarah said quietly. and hopefully showing our kids that some things are more important than money. The kids, Marcus said, his voice cracking slightly. How are they? They're good. Emma's starting college next week. Jake made the varsity basketball team. They're both strong, smart, and they know their own worth. Do they ask about me? Sarah considered lying, but decided Marcus deserved the truth. Sometimes. Emma's still angry. Jake misses you, but he's proud of what I did that day. Marcus nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I don't expect forgiveness, Sarah. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that I'm trying to become the kind of man who would have been worthy of you and the kids. What does that mean? It means I have a job. A real job, not some get-rich-quick scheme. I work construction in Cincinnati, and I go to meetings 3 times a week. I've been clean for 6 months, and I'm paying back the people I owe money to, $20 at a time. That's good, Marcus. I'm glad you're getting help. I heard about your new job, the wellness program thing. Sarah raised an eyebrow. How did you hear about that? I still have friends in Millbrook. They tell me you're something of a local celebrity now, the woman who chose principles over millions. I chose sanity over chaos. Marcus smiled sadly. You chose to be the person you always were instead of letting me turn you into someone else. I'm proud of you, Sarah. I know I don't have the right to be, but I am. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 15 years of shared history settling between them. Can I ask you something? Marcus said finally. What? Do you ever regret it, tearing up the ticket? Sarah considered the question seriously. You know what I regret? I regret that it took winning the lottery for me to realize my own worth. I regret that I spent so many years thinking I needed to fix you in order to be happy. I regret that our kids had to watch their family fall apart because their father couldn't control his addiction. But the money was never going to solve the real problem, Marcus. The real problem was that I'd forgotten who I was. I'd become so focused on holding our family together that I'd lost myself in the process. And now? Sarah smiled, and for the first time in years, it reached her eyes. Now I know exactly who I am. I'm a woman who works hard, who loves her children, and who doesn't compromise her values for anyone or anything. I'm a woman who's about to start a new career that will help other people find their own strength. I'm a woman who's worth more than any lottery ticket could ever be. Marcus reached across the table as if to touch her hand, then stopped himself. I'm sorry, Sarah, for all of it. For the years of lies, for the gambling, for trying to steal your moment of joy. I'm sorry for being the kind of man who made you feel like you had to choose between money and your soul. I accept your apology, Sarah said. And I forgive you, Marcus. Not for your sake, but for mine. Because holding on to anger was just another way of letting you control my life. They talked for another hour, about the kids, about their plans for the future, about the long road Marcus still had ahead of him. When they finally stood to leave, Marcus seemed lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Sarah, he said as they walked to their cars, I want you to know that I'm going to keep working on myself. Not because I think it'll bring you back, but because I want to be the kind of father our kids deserve. That's all I ever wanted, Marcus. And Sarah, that day at Murphy's, when you tore up that ticket, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. Driving home, Sarah felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Marcus was still Marcus. He'd probably always struggle with his addictions and his tendency toward manipulation. But he was trying to change, and that was something. More importantly, she'd realized that the woman who'd torn up that lottery ticket 6 months ago wasn't just making a statement about money. She was making a statement about who she was and who she was determined to become. That evening, Sarah sat on her front porch with Emma and Jake, watching the sun set over their quiet neighborhood. Tomorrow, Emma would leave for college. Next week, Sarah would start her new job. In a few months, Jake would be applying to colleges himself. Their lives were changing, evolving, growing in directions that had nothing to do with lottery tickets or sudden windfalls. They were building their futures through hard work, determination, and the unshakable knowledge that they were worth more than any amount of money could represent. "Mom," Emma said, leaning against her mother's shoulder, "do you think you'll ever buy another lottery ticket?" Sarah smiled, thinking about the question. "You know what? I might. Not because I think I'll win, but because I've learned something important." "What's that?" "I've learned that I've already won the only things that really matter." As the stars began to appear in the October sky, Sarah Mitchell sat surrounded by her children on the porch of her modest home, feeling richer than any lottery winner in history. She had her health, her family, her integrity, and a future built on her own merits. Some people might call her crazy for destroying a $15 million ticket. But Sarah knew better. She hadn't destroyed anything valuable that day at Murphy's Corner store. She had finally found it,